Well, good afternoon, everybody. International developments. Now, that's quite a challenge, or certainly has been in the last month, trying to decide exactly which bits I'm going to talk about. As I say, this is the part of the proceedings where I'm going to attempt at least to talk about recent and future developments. Preparing the speech, of course, has necessitated consideration of what might or might not have happened in the US elections, and perhaps, whilst today many are surprised by the result, perhaps the Brexit vote was a hint. Certainly, the twists and turns of the election campaign have made reflecting on the issues that the world faces that little bit harder. But did anyone actually notice that the position of both candidates was a dislike of carried interest vehicles, something for which Guernsey is known? An example of the need to watch international developments. But it's not for me to stand here and speculate any further on internal US politics. The theme of today's presentation is the interaction of business culture with regulation in the past decade. Obviously, in my talk on international developments, I'll be looking at the big picture as much as the future and the past. But one aspect upon which I think I can comment is the global trend that's been seen over the last 15 years of splitting the position of chief executive and chairman. For many reasons, it was considered that combining the roles was the most effective way to make an organisation efficient. However, the United Kingdom Corporate Governance Code advises against combining the posts, and indeed, at the last count, there was only one company in the FTSE 100 that actually shared a chief executive and a chairman. Research by Credit Suisse and separately MSCI show that over the last decade or so, greater shareholder returns are made in groups where the roles were split, with the chairman running the board and the CEO the company. It's important that these activities are recognised as different, and I offer it as an observation on the change in corporate culture. The other idea, and I think I'm going to float this one rather than offer it, and it builds on the Director General's observations at the end of his speech concerning eccentricity, is this. Alain de Botton, writing in the Financial Times on the 1st of January 2014, put the case for philosophers having a place in the company boardrooms. He said of wealth management that, on the surface, it is a business that promises customers a certain return on their portfolios, but the deeper and implicit promise is that you will live well with money around. However, he said that very few firms tackle the implications beneath this grand claim, and that letting the occasional philosopher into a business is not an indulgence. It would help management think more deeply about what a business should properly be trying to do with the customer's life in order to improve it. They'd be asking how money can properly contribute to the client's happiness. For those of you with an open mind and an access to the FT online, it was published on the 1st of January 2014. I'll now talk about the geopolitical stage, as, after all, world events shape markets. The international space in the last few years has been nothing if it's not been dominated by acronyms, whether they be BRICS or MINTS, Brexit or Grexit. We've certainly seen a significant period of flux. I will return to Brexit and the skirmishes that have broken out. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about the global scene, before ultimately returning to the question of the United Kingdom and ultimately Guernsey. I've already made mention of the US elections. Elsewhere, we've seen the Russian task force slip literally past our shores, though, and it would have perhaps been a bit less noticeable, and I'm showing my age here, if they'd used a little bit more Castrol GTX to avoid creating quite so much smoke. Further afield, there are the tragedies which continue to unravel in Syria, and Turkey, its near neighbour after an attempted coup, now sits in a rather uneasy position between its new Russian friends and membership of NATO. In the east, there is the increasing militarisation in the South China Seas and territorial assertion, and this in turn has even led to the first manoeuvres being undertaken between the Indonesian and Australian navies. In terms of the economy, we have seen an increase in the supply of oil through sanctions being lifted against Iran, and the effect that that has had on the price of oil. Closer to home, we've seen the weakening of sterling and the threat potentially that this brings of inflation. It's often easy to sit quietly in Guernsey and see geopolitical events at a distance, perhaps as something for the United Kingdom government to worry about on our behalf. However, now more than ever is the time to be alive to them for the opportunities and, in some cases, the threats that they present. Turning to Brexit, and in a speech on international developments this year, I couldn't help but mention it, it's still very much early days. We now believe we have a better understanding of the timeline. Article 50 should be triggered by the end of March 2017, following the 2-year negotiation period. No one, of course, could have missed the rumpus around the High Court challenge over the use by the Prime Minister of the royal prerogative to trigger Article 50 without a parliamentary vote. The High Court judgment has so far put a stop to that. The proceedings will leapfrog the Court of Appeal, yes, that is actually a technical legal term, and will be heard before the Supreme Court in the first week of December, with judgment likely early in January. If I were to guess, I'd say the Supreme Court will very likely uphold the High Court. This will force the introduction of a bill to Parliament, which of course will have to pass both houses. It will be fascinating to see how Parliament votes. Democracy should win in terms of respecting the referendum result, but if it does not, there could yet be a swift general election next year. The real battleground, I suspect, will take place in the House of Lords. Whatever happens with the triggering of Article 50, however, and the process of negotiation, the government has indicated its intention to introduce a Great Repeal Act. That adjective was last used in the 19th century in respect to the Great Reform Act. However, the reality is that legislation will be neither repeal nor reform, but rather the Great Retention Act, a piece of legislation aimed at preserving equivalence, but with power by regulation to pick and choose which pieces of legislation they wish later to repeal. It is said that it is this process that will truly categorise the nature of the exit, hard or soft, or perhaps, as the former is becoming known, as clean Brexit. On the subject of the nature of Brexit, this is a very interesting table, and in putting it up I must give full credit to HSBC and their economists. It outlines at least 7 different versions of Brexit based on the models currently known. Before any of this happens, however, there are elections in France, Germany and Netherlands, and with no disrespect to the chairman, I suspect it is in fact the French and German elections which are the most important, as those new governments will very clearly set the tone in the negotiations. Before even that happens, on the 4th of December, there's a referendum in Italy on constitutional reform, which, if it fails, could see the Italian government fall. And in Italy, there is the anti-EU Five-Star Party waiting in the wings. After the Trump victory, how will electorates in any of these countries vote? That said, if anyone has been following politics way to the north in Iceland, they have already recently elected 10 new MPs from the interestingly named Pirate Party, an anti-establishment party, making them the second, or the joint second largest party in the Icelandic parliament. But if we're actually looking rather than what might happen, we should look at the here and now. In London, the French are already on stage, having set up a team to tempt business away to Paris. And unnoticed by many, the day after the Brexit vote, altered their tax rules to make Paris a much more attractive place to expats. Think of that, tax competition from a socialist government. Further, in a moment of black comedy, the French Constitutional Court has, at the 11th hour, ruled on beneficial ownership that it is unconstitutional. Faced with all of that, we have the British sense of humour. The Bank of England issued the new indestructible £5 note, with, of course, Churchill on the reverse. So we'll see how Brexit really does develop. So what does it actually show us? Well, that it's too soon to see the direction on Brexit, but this does not mean that it can be ignored. The focus now of the United Kingdom's government is in part on new trade deals. Freed as the United Kingdom will be from the EU's monopoly on negotiating these, although we have recently seen that the Canadian deal took 7 years, endured a rather prolonged labour, and showed the power of disruption by one regional government in Belgium, effectively jeopardising the deal. The serious message, to which I will return, is that Guernsey should look beyond the United Kingdom and the EU. We know that our reputation as a bailiwick is important. It's important how we are perceived internationally, and this will become particularly important as the bailiwick looks to become involved with trade deals that the United Kingdom seeks to negotiate. In this, we need to think about our products that can complement those that the UK offers, so that, when marketed together, these make the market bigger for both jurisdictions. I'm not saying that we shouldn't also be competitive with the United Kingdom, not at all. However, opportunities exist in both respects. Closer to home, therefore, it is important for the bailiwick to be respected as a jurisdiction by those within the United Kingdom who will negotiate on our behalf. It's imperative that we can demonstrate this through a strong corporate culture that is backed by appropriate enforcement, which you will hear more about next from Simon Godin, the Director of Enforcement. We all need to recognise that the corporate culture seems to be a focus of the current administration in London. Opportunities exist beyond the near continent, and the Commission, working with Guernsey Finance, has looked to this through the creation of a Hong Kong representative office and with the co-location of Commission staff in Hong Kong. You've just heard on the screen from Andy Sloan. It's there to support the development of business from the Far East. In this way, it is hoped, in particular, by the easy access to regulatory staff, businesses wishing to establish a presence or a product in the bailiwick can have open access to real-time interaction, and in that way, to make the process of licensing more efficient for them, with the obvious benefits thereafter for the bailiwick. The representative office has been open for a little over 6 months and has seen interesting participation, in particular from the insurance space. You may have picked up from yesterday's Guernsey Press the insurance masterclass that was held in Hong Kong and attended by Caroline Bradley from the Commission. Also, if you've not seen it, there is the dedicated Hong Kong website, and this hopefully is the address on the slide there for you as well. The Commission's approach in this regard was based on the view that with our positive AML reputation, better placed Guernsey structures with respect to those from the Cayman and the BVI, and from those seeds lay the potential for development of Guernsey-based fiduciary and wealth services. The feedback we have gained in recent weeks, during the STEP conference for example, is that this remains the case and that the critical path will be the conversion obviously of the opportunities. Moreover, combined with this, Guernsey's leadership on CRS and with the adoption by Hong Kong and Singapore in 2017 provides greater impetus for opportunity. A key test of our ability to work collaboratively with Guernsey Finance will be our success in jointly developing a programme of activity to help the bailiwick exploit this fortuitous leadership circumstance. Returning to the opportunities of Brexit, my earlier reference to this was, however, directed to all of you here in the hall today. There is a new path. Indeed, there are several in front of us, none of them yet a road. Free trade and service agreements are new to most of us, new to an entire generation, possibly two. More so in the United Kingdom and Her Majesty's government, who are still adapting to them. In the islands, we have had the advantage. We've always been outside the EU. In Brexit terms, the message is simple: nothing to see here. In context, this is not new to us. We understand the concepts of equivalence in third country rights. These, however, are new concepts to others in the United Kingdom, and government departments there are having to become accustomed to the view from the other end of the telescope. Although I must admit, when I first wrote that, it was spell-checked as accosted, and I think that's partly how perhaps officials within the United Kingdom government are feeling by looking through the other end of the telescope. However, I think the word equally is accustomed, and that is what will be happening. So, to dwell on the EU status for a moment, can I commend you to the policy letter by the states that was issued in the days following the Brexit vote. The web address is on the screen now. It details the bailiwick's status, so if you want to broaden your understanding of the bailiwick's position truly under Protocol 3, it provides very good guidance to the actual relationship. Now, where am I actually going with this? Well, the bailiwick has an opportunity on new business. We are so used to seeing the EU and the UK as markets, but for a number of reasons, looking further afield is ever more important and needs action now. There is a window during which we are ahead of the field, but once the UK has deciphered the view from the other end of that telescope, they will begin to bear down on us. The Commission is interested in hearing from you about new markets and ideas. Why? Because we need to understand the propositions now so that we can ensure, working with government, that the plumbing will work as and when those ideas come to fruition. And talking of plumbing for a moment, a very important part of that, besides the operation of, for example, the BACS system, is data protection. Currently, bailiwick legislation enacted in 2001 allows the free transfer of data between the bailiwick and member states of the EU. Now, however, there's a new regulation with the catchy title of the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, as it's known. It came into effect on the 25th of May this year, and it updates EU-wide regime. When you came in this afternoon, you probably found this leaflet waiting for you on your seat. The reason I draw attention to it is it's been produced by the Guernsey Data Protection Commissioner, and it sets out the key points of the GDPR, and I commend it to you. It's something for your boards to begin to think about now. Implementation is due by May 2018, and regardless of the nature of Brexit, this will survive. So, for anyone doing business with Europe, it's important. Finally, to return to and put this in the Guernsey context, now is the moment for some leadership by you. These are your businesses. You know them best. So please help us identify the paths to take. It may be that we're entering a period where some countries will isolate themselves, others erect protectionist barriers. But there are others where opportunities will exist. As Churchill once said, and it's on the back of that £5 note, there is this quote, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat." Thank you very much.